When the movie Jaws first opened, it created a sensation. And shark sightings increased by the thousands in all the vast and unknown depths of the ocean. How could there have been only one? The all-new Jaws 2. See it before you go back in the water.
In 1968, George Romero brought us Night of the Living Dead. It became the classic horror film of its time.
Not that room! Not that room!
Now, George Romero brings us the most intensely shocking motion picture experience for all time. Imagine, if you will, that something has gone terribly wrong.
Shoot it, man.
Now, accept the fact that there's no escaping the horrible consequences. George Romero brings back the dead.
We must not be lulled by the concept that these are our family members or our friends. They are not. They will not respond to such emotions.
Operator dead. Post abandoned.
We may never get out alive.
It's everywhere. What the hell is it?
Looks like a shopping center, one of those big indoor malls.
What are they doing? Why do they come here?
Some kind of instinct, memory, what they used to do. This was an important place in their lives.
What is it?
We've got a war.
We have spawned our own savagery. Soon, it will consume us all. It is a horrible, hauntingly accurate vision of the mindless excesses of a society gone mad.
They must be destroyed on sight.
When there is no more room in hell, the dead will walk the earth.
We are down to the line, folks. We are down to the line.
Dawn of the Dead.
Picture this. A shopping mall, but the power is out, the stores are dark, and something is moving between the escalators. Not running, not rushing. Just moving the way a tide moves, slow and inevitable, and completely indifferent to whatever is standing in its way. You remember the first time you saw that image? Maybe you were too young, maybe the lights were already off. Maybe you told yourself you would turn it off after 10 more minutes. And then the 10 minutes became an hour. And by the time the credits rolled, you were sitting in the exact same position you started in because you had forgotten how to move. That is what sequels were supposed to destroy. The rule was simple, and it had never once been broken, not in any genre, not in any decade. You make a great horror film. You make money, you greenlight a follow-up, and the follow-up quietly buries whatever made the original worth watching. More of the same, but less of everything. That was the deal. That was always the deal. Except in the 1970s, a handful of filmmakers, some of them working with shrinking budgets, impossible expectations, and studio interference on every single day of production, somehow broke that rule completely. They made sequels that did not just survive the shadow of the originals. Some of them stepped out of that shadow entirely and cast one of their own tonight. We are looking at 7 of them. 7 horror sequels from the 1970s that had absolutely no business being as effective, as unsettling, or as genuinely terrifying as they turned out to be. One entry on this list was so despised by critics when it opened that it was practically laughed out of theaters. And yet 45 years later, there is a specific scene in that film that horror directors still study, still argue about, still cannot fully explain. Stay with me, because by the time we get to number 1, you are going to remember exactly where you were, The first time the screen showed you something a sequel was never supposed to be capable of showing you. It came out in 1973, just 1 year after the original, and nobody expected anything from it. Nobody. The first Blackula had been a genuine surprise, an African prince cursed by Dracula himself, trapped in a coffin for 2 centuries, awakened in 1970s Los Angeles. It had style and tragedy baked into it in equal measure. The sequel had neither of those things on paper. A rushed production, a recycled premise, a studio that wanted product on screens before the momentum died. That is not a recipe for anything worth remembering. But here is what happened. They hired William Crane back to direct. They gave Pam Grier the role she was born to inhabit in this particular universe, and somewhere between the budget constraints and the tight schedule, the film found something the original had only gestured toward. It found ritual. It found the idea that the curse was not simply a punishment to be endured, but a wound that could potentially be healed. If someone with enough spiritual authority and enough will was willing to reach into the darkness and pull something human back out of it. Grier's character is a practitioner of voodoo, and the film treats that tradition with more respect than almost any Hollywood production of its era would bother to. The horror here is not external. It is the horror of being so close to salvation and feeling it slip. The moment that stays with you is quiet. Grier has almost done it. The ritual is working. Mamualda, the prince underneath the curse, is surfacing. And then the interruption comes, and you watch a man who has been suffering for 200 years understand in real time that the one chance he was ever going to get has just been taken from him. No fangs, no blood, just a face collapsing under the weight of something permanent. The film never got a third entry. It did not need one. That expression was the ending the whole franchise had been building toward and did not know it.
Yesterday, Dracula was the most fearsome being the screen has ever seen. Today, tonight, you could be Dracula's next victim.
Something new, yet as old as time.
Come on, Johnny.
A date with the devil.
Are you ready? He's ready. He's waiting to freak you out. Right out of this world.
Died September the 18th, 1872. 100 years ago to the day.
You who witness it must swear before the name of the devil to keep it secret.
Who knows about vampires, for God's sake? My grandfather died fighting a vampire. The most terrible, the most dangerous vampire of all time.
The year is 1972. A leap year in horror. A vintage year for vampires.
Count Dracula!
The time for the masters of horror to meet again in the 20th century.
Dracula Ad 1972 arrived the same year its title promised, and the premise sounds like exactly the kind of disaster a franchise produces when it has run out of ideas. Take Count Dracula, who by this point in the Hammer series had already died, and returned so many times the audience had started keeping count, and drop him into swinging London, bell-bottoms, rock music. Young people in Chelsea saying groovy things while a centuries. Old vampire tries to figure out what decade he is in. On paper, this is not horror. On paper, this is a parody of a parody. What nobody anticipated was Christopher Lee deciding this was the one he was going to take seriously. The setup is deceptively clever once you stop laughing at the surface. A group of young people perform a black mass in a deconsecrated church, not because they genuinely believe it will work, but because it feels transgressive and exciting. And it is 1972, and everything is transgressive and exciting. And then it works. The film is making an argument that the 1970s counterculture, for all its rebellion and freedom, had cleared away enough of the old guardrails that something very old and very patient could find its way back through the gap. Dracula does not feel out of place in London. He feels like he was waiting for exactly this cultural moment. Peter Cushing, playing Van Helsing's grandson, gives the film its spine. The scene where he pieces together what has happened, standing in that ruined church surrounded by evidence he does not want to believe, is everything Hammer did well concentrated into 4 minutes of controlled, quiet dread. The studio made 3 more vampire films after this one, each one looser and stranger than the last. None of them had that scene. None of them had Lee looking at the modern world with that specific expression, the one that says he has seen everything before and found it wanting.
When the movie Jaws first opened, it created a sensation. And shark sightings increased by the thousands in all the vast and unknown depths of the ocean. How could there have been only one? The all-new Jaws 2. See it before you go back in the water.
The summer of 1975 had taught an entire generation to stay out of the water. 3 years later, someone decided to ask what would happen if you went back in. The conventional wisdom on Jaws 2 has always been that it is less or smaller, that without Spielberg behind the camera the whole enterprise was just a mechanical exercise in repeating the same beats with diminishing returns. And in some technical sense that argument is correct. You cannot replicate the specific alchemy of the original. Nobody was going to try. But director Jeanette Swark made a different choice, and it turned out to be the right one. Instead of trying to rebuild what Spielberg had constructed, he shifted the weight of the film onto a single question that the original had never fully answered. What does it do to a man to have survived something like that? Roy Scheider's Chief Brody is not the same person he was on that boat. He knows what is in the water. He knows it in a way that nobody around him can access or verify or take seriously. And the film is quietly ruthless about how institutions respond to a person who has seen something the institution would prefer not to acknowledge. The town council does not believe him. His superiors do not believe him. The film spends a full hour making you feel the specific loneliness of being right about something no one else will admit is real. The shark attacks when they come are effective precisely because the film has earned them. The moment on the beach, the water churning, Brody standing at the edge, knowing before anyone else what is happening, carries a weight. The original's attack sequences never needed to carry because they had not done that groundwork. Hollywood has remade and revisited the Jaws franchise 4 times since. Not one of those films understood what made this particular sequel work. They all went back into the water. None of them bothered to stand on the shore first.
In 1968, George Romero brought us Night of the Living Dead. It became the classic horror film of its time.
Not that room! Not that room!
Now, George Romero brings us the most intensely shocking motion picture experience for all time. Imagine, if you will, that something has gone terribly wrong.
Shoot it, man.
Now, accept the fact that there's no escaping the horrible consequences. George Romero brings back the dead.
We must not be lulled by the concept that these are our family members or our friends. They are not. They will not respond to such emotions.
Operator dead. Post abandoned.
We may never get out alive.
It's everywhere. What the hell is it?
Looks like a shopping center, one of those big indoor malls.
What are they doing? Why do they come here?
Some kind of instinct, memory, what they used to do. This was an important place in their lives.
What is it?
We've got a war.
I'm
made.
We have spawned our own savagery. Soon it will consume us all. It is a horrible, hauntingly accurate vision of the mindless excesses of a society gone mad.
They must be destroyed on sight.
When there is no more room in hell, the dead will walk the earth.
We are down to the line, folks. We are down to the line.
Dawn of the Dead.
Night of the Living Dead had given the world the dead walking. 10 years later, George Romero asked a question that should have been obvious from the beginning, but that nobody had thought to ask out loud. If the dead are walking, where do the living go? They go to the mall. The choice is so perfect. It almost feels like a joke, and Romero knew that. And he made the joke and the horror and the social commentary all run on exactly the same track simultaneously, without any of them canceling the others out. The Monroeville Mall in Pennsylvania becomes the most resonant location in horror film history. Not because of what happens inside it, but because of what it means that the survivors chose it. Safety, comfort, abundance. Everything the consumer culture of the 1970s had promised its citizens was waiting for them inside those walls, and the dead were already there too. Moving between the stores on pure muscle memory, drawn back to the place that had mattered most to them while they were alive. Romero does not explain this. He just shows it and lets the image sit. The terror in Dawn of the Dead is not the zombies. The zombies are slow. The survivors are armed. The horror is the gradual realization that surviving is not the same as living, that the mall provides everything except meaning, and that the people inside it are beginning to resemble what is outside the doors in ways that have nothing to do with infection. The sequence where the survivors first secure the mall, moving through darkened department stores, while the dead drift past mannequins and fountain displays, is 30 minutes of filmmaking that no horror sequel before or since has matched for sustained. Suffocating dread wrapped inside something that looks almost like triumph. Romero made 4 more Dead films after this one. Each of them carried a piece of what this film built. None of them carried all of it.
The terror of the past is but a taste of the future. What happened before was a hint of the horror to come. The first time was only a warning.
Why only other boys and not Damien?
I don't understand.
Damien has a different cell structure.
Different? What does it mean?
I've been working on the story for years now. I think I pieced it together. Oh, please, please, you must listen to me.
The first time was only a warning.
Five deaths, 5 unexplained, horrible accidents. We are all in great danger.
You can't make me believe it.
You've got to believe it. He killed Mark, he killed Atherton and Bessarion. And he'll keep on killing. He'll kill anyone he thinks is threatening him.
Listen to yourself. Listen to how crazy you sound.
Man, I saw Charles killed. I saw Damien's face on the wall.
William Holden.
Where's Damien?
Lee Grant. Damien. Omen 2. The first time was only a war.
The Omen had ended with a question dressed up as a conclusion. The child was still alive. The prophecy was still in motion, and the audience walked out of the theater in 1976 knowing, without being told, that whatever was coming next was going to be worse, because the first film had spent 2 hours establishing exactly how bad things get when nobody around Damien understands what he is. The sequel had a different problem entirely. Everyone knows now Damien. Omen II is a film about a boy who discovers he is the Antichrist, and the discovery does not break him. That is the thing that separates it from almost every other horror sequel of its era. The horror is not external threat, it is internal architecture. Watching a 13-year-old boy absorb information that would shatter most adults, process it methodically, and begin to understand not just what he is, but what he is capable of, is genuinely unsettling in a way that no monster appearance could match. William Holden as his uncle brings the same quiet devastation that Gregory Peck brought to the original. A man who loves a child, and slowly comes to understand that the love is not returned in any human sense of the word. The deaths in this film are more elaborate than anything in the original, but director Don Taylor is smart enough to make each one feel less like spectacle and more like inevitability. The raven, the ice, the elevator. Each sequence is less about shock and more about the feeling that the world is being quietly rearranged around Damien's needs, without anyone having agreed to it. The moment that does not leave you is Damien alone in his room after the revelation, sitting completely still, and the camera staying on his face long enough that you stop waiting for a reaction and start understanding that the absence of one is the whole point. The franchise stumbled badly with its third entry. It recovered, partially, decades later. Neither outcome changes what this film accomplished in the space between the question the original asked and the answer this one quietly, methodically delivered.
4 years ago, The Exorcist shocked the world. Now, the struggle between good and evil goes on. Richard Burton, Louise Fletcher, Max von Sydow, James Earl Jones, Exorcist II, The Heretic.
Let's be honest about something first. When Exorcist II, The Heretic opened in 1977, audiences booed, not politely. Not the quiet disappointment of people who had expected more. Actual, audible, sustained booing in theaters across the country. The film was pulled from release, partially re-edited, put back into theaters, booed again. Critics lined up to describe it as one of the worst sequels ever made. John Boorman, the director, has spent the decade since offering various explanations for what went wrong. And here's the thing. They were not entirely wrong. The film is genuinely strange. It is uneven in ways that feel less like miscalculation and more like the product of a filmmaker who is trying to do something the studio, the audience, and possibly the laws of commercial cinema were never going to allow him to finish. But watch it again now. 45 years later, with the booing faded and the expectations finally gone, and something surfaces that the noise had been covering the entire time. Boorman was not trying to make The Exorcist again. He was trying to make a film about what possession leaves behind, about the specific texture of surviving something that reached inside you and rearranged things that were not supposed to be moved. Linda Blair's Regan is not the same person who came down those stairs. The film is honest about that in a way that sequels almost never are, because honesty about trauma is not what audiences in 1977 paid $4 to experience on a Friday night. The hypnosis sequences, the locust imagery, the synchronized regression scenes, where two people share the same psychological space across time and distance. These are not failed horror set pieces. They are a filmmaker reaching for something genuinely experimental inside a franchise that had no room for experiments. Richard Burton as Father Lamont is the performance the film deserved a better film to contain. A man whose faith has been eroded not by doubt, but by direct encounter with something that confirmed everything he believed and destroyed his ability to believe it simultaneously. There is a scene where he sits in a psychiatric facility watching footage of the original exorcism, and his face does something that no horror sequel had asked an actor to do before, and almost none have asked since. The film collapsed at the box office and took its reputation with it. What it left underneath the collapse, for anyone willing to look, was the only sequel in the entire Exorcist franchise that treated the original survivors as people rather than vehicles for another round of the same confrontation. Hollywood has returned to The Exorcist, 3 more times since, each one louder, each one more eager to give audiences exactly what the booing in 1977 said they wanted. None of them asked what Regan remembered when she woke up the next morning. This one did. That has to count for something.
Carci! Mamma. Ti devo uccidere.
Mario Bava made this film knowing it was going to be his last. Not because anyone told him so, not because his health had given him a deadline, but because he had been making horror films since the early 1960s, and he understood instinctively when a body of work had found its natural ending point. Shock, released in Italy as Shock, and sometimes distributed internationally under the title Beyond the Door 2, despite having only the loosest thematic connection to that earlier film, is not the kind of finale most directors would choose. There is no grandeur in it, no summation. It is small and domestic and relentlessly, suffocatingly intimate, and it is the most frightening thing Bava ever made. The setup is almost insultingly simple. A woman moves back into the house where her first husband died under circumstances that were never fully explained. She has a new husband now, a son from the first marriage, and the reasonable expectation that starting over in a familiar place might feel like continuity rather than repetition. The house has different ideas. What Bava understood, and what makes this film the #1 entry on this list, is that the most effective horror sequels do not continue the story of the original. They continue the feeling. Shock is not interested in explaining its supernatural mechanics, or connecting its mythology to anything that came before. It is interested in one thing only: the specific psychological texture of a woman who cannot trust her own perception of her child, and the way a house can become a collaborator in that unraveling. The boy is the film's true instrument of terror, not because he does anything overtly monstrous in the early sequences, but because Bava shoots him the way you would shoot, something you were not entirely sure was still a child. Small framings held just a beat too long, positioned in doorways and at the edges of mirrors in ways that make the domestic space feel subtly, persistently wrong. By the time the film reaches its final act, you have been so thoroughly prepared by atmosphere alone that the actual confrontation arrives not as a shock, but as a confirmation of something you had been dreading for an hour without being able to name it. The staircase sequence near the end is 4 minutes of pure Bava. No dialogue, almost no score, just a woman, a child, a set of stairs, and the camera moving between them with the patience of something that has already decided how this ends, and is simply waiting for the people on screen to catch up. Hollywood has never touched this one, never remade it, never rebooted it, never extracted its mechanics for use in something louder and more commercially viable. That neglect is partly why it still works. Some doors stay frightening precisely because nobody has gotten around to explaining what is behind them. Bava died in 1980. Shock was released in 1977. In between, he made one more film, a light-hearted adventure that had nothing to do with horror. But this was the goodbye that mattered. A filmmaker who had spent his career building dread out of color and shadow and negative space, ending on a film about a house that remembers everything and forgives nothing. That is not a bad way to finish. Here is what these 7 films have in common. And it is not what the studios that greenlit them intended. Every single one of them was made under constraint, shrinking budgets, tight schedules, audiences who had already decided before the first frame that they were watching something inferior, filmmakers who were either fighting the system openly, like Borman with his strange and uncompromising vision for what a possessed girl looks like, years after the fact, or working quietly within it, like Bava, building something personal and permanent out of materials the industry considered disposable, and every single one of them found something the original had left on the table. Not because sequels are secretly better than we give them credit for. Most of them are exactly as bad as the reputation says, but because occasionally, under the right conditions, the pressure of working in a shadow forces a filmmaker to find a door the original never opened. Romero found an entire civilization inside a shopping mall. Swark found the loneliness of being the only person in the room who knows what is in the water. Bava found a staircase and a child and 4 minutes of silence that have not stopped resonating in the 45 years since. These films are not about monsters. None of the best horror ever is. They are about the fears that survive the first encounter. The fear that healing is not actually possible. The fear that the institutions built to protect you will choose comfort over truth every single time. The fear that the people closest to you are not entirely who you understood them to be. The fear that some experiences leave a mark on the world itself, not just on the people who live through them. And that moving back into the house does not mean the house is forgotten. That is what the 1970s did to horror. It took the genre out of the Gothic castles and the fog, covered moors and put it in malls and beach towns and suburban kitchens, and found that the fear followed without any trouble at all. These 7 sequels inherited that discovery and did something genuinely brave with it. They refused to simply repeat it. Now I want to hear from you. Which scene from this list is still with you? Is it Brody on the beach, knowing before anyone else? Is it Damien sitting completely still in that room? Is it Bava's staircase? Drop it in the comments. And if there is a 1970s horror sequel you think deserved a spot on this list that did not make it, tell me which one and tell me why. Some of those conversations in the comments have sent me down rabbit holes that became entire future videos. If you stayed with this one all the way to the end, hit like. It tells the algorithm that there is an audience for horror that takes the genre seriously, and that audience is bigger than anyone in a boardroom currently believes. Subscribe if you want to be here for the next one, because next time we are going into territory that is going to be uncomfortable in a different way entirely. We are looking at the horror films that critics destroyed when they first came out, films that got 2 stars and walked out of theaters in shame, that quietly became the films a generation of filmmakers grew up studying in secret, the ones Hollywood was wrong about in ways it has never fully admitted. That list is already built. Some of the names on it are going to surprise you. Stay in the dark a little longer.
Subscribe for the next nightmare.